you can choose whichever sense you want and just make that your universe for 10 seconds, like maybe even rubbing 2 fingers together, being fascinated by that. And people won't have to see what you're doing, or even if they see what you're doing, it doesn't matter.
For parents of neurodivergent children, understanding and nurturing emotional regulation can feel really complex, but it's so important for their well-being. Why is emotional regulation such a challenging area for our neurodivergent kids? And how can the idea of co-regulation serve as a bridge to self-regulation? Today, we're diving deep with Sheryl Stoller, an expert on supporting families in their journey with raising neurodivergent children. From fostering empathy and non-judgment at home to addressing the challenges faced by teachers in the classroom, Sheryl offers insights drawn from her experience both professionally and as a neurodivergent parent herself. That's straight ahead on episode 190. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and this is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
What is neurodiversity? You see the world differently.
Autism spectrum.
Gifted.
Complexities that are inherently inside.
ADHD.
Dysgraphia.
Tourette's.
All brains are different.
You are exactly what this world needs.
This is the
Neurodiversity
Podcast.
The countdown is on for our Creating Neurodiversity-Affirming Classrooms crash course for educators that launches next week. I can hardly believe that we already have over 2,000 people registered for this live event. It launches on Tuesday, September 19th, when I'm joined by my friend and education expert, Amanda Morin. Then, on Thursday, Sarah Kesty, host of the Executive Function podcast, will be with me. We wrap up on Friday with a workshop and chance to collaborate live with other teachers who are committed to finding ways to support the neurodivergent learners in their school. If you haven't signed up yet, find the link in the show notes and get on the list. It's free, and recordings are available for 1 week following the event in case you can't attend live. I hope to see you there. Okay, my conversation with Sheryl Stoller is up next.
On a previous episode of the Neurodiversity Podcast.
I think there is this kind of in our cultural DNA still, this idea that properly behaving, children should be seen and not heard. I think there's kind of this mystical, unspoken idea that behavior management is appropriate and somehow valued. Somehow, with how the research was interpreted as successful, it became the mainstay of our education system. And when you look at the science, the neuroscience of resilience, and you lay that side by side to behavioral management, the two don't line up very well.
That's episode 116. Find it in your favorite podcast app.
Today, I am happy to welcome Sheryl Stoller to the podcast. Sheryl works with neurodiverse families to support parents raising neurodivergent children. So Sheryl, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the importance of emotional regulation and how we as adults can help our children develop this really important skill. So for our autistic or ADHD or even twice exceptional kids, just to name a few of those neurotypes that we might see, this can be an area that really just impacts them on a daily basis. So to start us off, can you talk a bit about why neurodivergent kids might need some additional support in this area?
Neurodivergent people, the parents as well, have heightened experiences of living. They likely have the biology. There's actually biological differences in terms of the genetics, how the genes physically are and how they express themselves. So everything is heightened. And their receptivity to all of the stimulus around them can be magnified by their systems. And being magnified means that they are living multiple lives almost all at once. And therefore, they're being able to ground themselves and to help their nervous systems get centered and feel in that level that's safe and social is harder. And it's even more incumbent upon the grown-up to be such a strong source of that grounding for the children's unconscious, subconscious, autonomic nervous system to regulate, because with our mirror neurons, we mimic what's in front of us. All humans do. Mm-hmm. And children's brains don't have that. They're still under construction for the part of their brains that are responsible for regulating. So they have to borrow our regulation, which means we have to learn, and nobody really teaches us how to resource ourselves, how to create space between the stimulus and response so that we become the nervous system that helps their nervous system just automatically begin to regulate and to soothe.
It's interesting how much we've really learned over time. In the past, when children would be dysregulated and it was seen as a behavioral issue, we would shout or discipline or whatever. And the only reason that would ever work, if it worked, is because it was fear-based.
Exactly.
And so then the anxiety was overriding, and that fear of whatever was going to happen caused all of it to be internalized. But it wasn't like kids were actually learning how to self-regulate. But it is a huge shift for most of us as parents. I think very few adults today were parented in this way.
Absolutely. I think understanding, if parents listening can understand, don't even think about the content. You start with our nervous systems, ourselves, our own to start with. So having that awareness of our body with compassion, I call that my ABCs, so that we can see, where are we? Where's our nervous system right now in this moment? And then as soon as we catch it, that it's heightened, our own, very likely because our mirror neurons are picking up theirs. And so that we can then know what to do with that. I mean, I have practices that I teach clients in my parent coaching practice for how to be with our nervous system so that we can effectively and efficiently bring it back to the smooth heartbeat. Regular coherence is a term that's used for it, and make that strong so that we're exuding an energy that their nervous system has to try to mimic. It just automatically mimics. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
What I hear you saying is that so much of this comes back on us, the adults, to support our kids and help them to learn those skills.
Yeah.
And whether we're a parent in the home or a teacher in the classroom, we kind of have to recognize the needs that we have for ourselves and work towards that self-regulation, because that really is a key. You mentioned some strategies. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that adults should consider when they're thinking about regulating their own emotions? Like, are there some specific strategies that can help along that path?
Yeah. One that you've probably heard is the breath is an amazing, amazing resource. And I invite everybody to envision pulling in any resources that you need while you inhale, exhaling, releasing your burdens, releasing the pain even. Let's say you're in a classroom where you have a very loud child or multiple children and your ears are really hurting. It's sort of helping you notice that and have a place to send it. So the breath is an incredibly valuable resource, and a resource that people don't often realize. All of the 5 senses. You can choose whichever sense you want and just make that your universe for 10 seconds, like maybe even rubbing 2 fingers together, being fascinated by that. And people won't have to see what you're doing, or even if they see what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You can use it as, I'm focusing here. And once you've done that, like as if it's a train that pulls you along, you help disengage. You have to use a different part of your brain than the survival mode in this process. So that helps untangle touch, hearing, smelling, seeing. If you have anchor objects or our own fidgets or whatever it may be in your pocket, wherever you are, every room having them. But one resource that we forget about, nobody reminds us about, is the earth. We can take advantage of the physics and realize that we are supported. Quite literally, the earth is holding us up. The earth can also receive anything we have to press into it, pressing into the chair, which presses into the legs of the chair, which presses into the floor, which goes to the earth. It can receive anything we have to give it, and we can envision that equal and opposite reaction. It's pushing up. We're pushing down. It's pushing up. So we don't have to feel alone when we understand that we're part of this whole system. The air, the oxygen, the ions in the air, whatever level of physics or biology that you enjoy playing with, you're not alone.
Yeah. Directing that focus and directing that attention on those sensations gets us out of that emotion or the limbic system, the survival part of the brain, and can help us just to pause in order to kind of recalibrate. And it's interesting that you mentioned that feeling of the pressure. That's one of my favorite kind of grounding techniques, is just all of a sudden just directing your focus to kind of where you're sitting and that pressure, and it is calming. And I think these are all basic things that I feel like sometimes people don't always think will work for them. When I talk to my clients specifically, and we might brainstorm some different things, first of all, I like to give them a lot of options so they can kind of figure out, what might work or what are they willing to try. But the other thing I always mention is the fact that it's not necessarily going to work the first time you try it. Like, it is a skill that needs to be built. And then once you figure out what works for you, and then once your brain gets used to you using those in those situations, then it's much more effective. Because I think sometimes, especially for sometimes my neurodivergent clients who are kids, and they're like, I tried that, it doesn't work for me. And we want to try to teach it as a skill, just like anything else.
Absolutely. And part of creating a habit, as you said, is the repetition. There are people who are sensory seekers, and they might like lots of different things. It's like, no, that's not holding me enough for long enough to repeat that. No, that doesn't work. Helping know that, okay, if you want to switch between different senses, go for it. What I often do with my clients is I observe what they're already doing. So when we help ourselves focus on our body's already trying, it's already trying to support us, and just building on that and helping them tap into that so that they have agency, but know also that they can rely on us as the parent or the teacher, that the adult isn't getting blown out of the water by our emotion, because then there's just more to fear for the child. It's like, oh my God, the adult can't even handle this. This out of control feeling doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. They don't like it. And when we as parents can understand that our first role is to be that grounded, loving, non-anxious, non-fear-based source of stability, seeing them safe, soothed, and secure, that's what creates the secure attachment to oneself and to others. And it really requires a lot of the parents. I mean, I'm saying, okay, be non-anxious. Don't have fear to parents. What the hey? We're wired to have fear. We're wired to be hypervigilant for protecting our children. And we used to live in villages. We used to have the community right there. I'm obviously going way back in time. But that's how we were built, but we don't have that now. So I'm inviting parents often who themselves are neurodivergent, who have neurodivergent kids, build your supports, have your human connection. Now, I found being neurodiverse and having neurodiverse kids 100% isolating. I did not trust other people, rightfully so, to understand and to treat us with kindness and understanding and compassion. So the fact that you do this podcast, that you've made this available to the world. I love that neurodivergent is a word that people now know to search. and they can find you and find the community.
It's good for everybody to kind of have that sense of connection, which kind of brings me to thinking about the connection we have with our kids. And within the neurodiversity community, a strategy that a lot of people have been discussing recently is this idea of co-regulation. I like to think of co-regulation as a stepping stone that kind of scaffolds the skills of regulation before someone can learn to self-regulate. So can you share a little bit about what co-regulation is and why we need to consider it as an important strategy?
I think that co-regulation, it goes back to understanding that the child's brain is not an adult brain. It's not a little adult brain. And it's really confusing when our kids are precocious in their abilities to think in certain ways. It's like, if they can understand that, how the heck can they not have the prefrontal cortex to be able to regulate? I don't get it. It's so confusing when you're having an adult conversation 1 second and the next second they have no ability. It's because it's still under construction, the child's brain. So by witnessing us going from the struggle through the process to the regulation, their body has an experience by witnessing us catch yourself early, intercept the survival mode, pause. We might verbalize aloud, whoa, that's a big emotion that just came like a tsunami wave on me. I'm going to, and then voice what you're doing to help your nervous system, so that they can witness you. And that's in the little moments. I mean, in the big moments when they're exploding from 0 to 100, obviously that's not going to work. But look for the times and ways to practice in their presence so that they've created an experience of it. And if you repeat that frequently, they're creating a brain pathway. Mm-hmm. They're growing that pathway versus all of the other pathways that are growing at the same time. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the automatic response in their nervous system that they don't even know is going on. The mirror neurons, like when you look at a baby and you smile, make a silly face, the baby smiles back. Those are the mirror neurons mimicking to understand what's in front of us. So when we get our heartbeat and our facial expressions and our body language to communicate the safety, their body can't help but mimic that in time. It's not going to happen right away. And again, for those who enjoy science and physics, when you've got two waves coming at each other and they meet, it comes halfway in between the size of the first and the second. So theirs gets smaller, and we continue to be consistent about this. So their smaller wave can get smaller again and smaller again. So our staying with it in being the even heartbeat. And the reason I'm focusing on the heart, which is calibrated through the breathing, which is calibrated also through thoughts, that we have the ability to shift our breathing, which then shifts our heart rate. Mm-hmm. So our being able to not be afraid of their emotions, and not only not be afraid, welcome their offload so that they can co-regulate, they can not be afraid of their emotions, that they can co-regulate to us, because that builds the practice for that brain pathway. There's so much more I want to say, but I want to pause and give you a chance to explore what you want to explore about it.
When you mention accepting and even welcoming those big emotions that they might have, when I'm sitting in my counselor's chair and I'm working with a child or a family, I'm able to view their situation and kind of easily keep this mentality of non-judgment and really understand each individual's perspective as we work through that situation. But I have to admit that when I'm at home with my own kids, there are a lot of things that get in the way of that. So when I'm at the office, I'm totally focused on one individual. And usually at home, I'm being pulled in a ton of different directions. And also, my emotions aren't nearly as tied up with my clients as they are with my own children. Can you share a little bit about how we can really emphasize that importance of empathy and non-judgment when we are feeling stressed and working with our kids?
Yeah. Self-compassion is really the start. So getting the process down to its essence, it's intercept the survival mode. As you say, our emotions are tied up with our kids. They've got pulled in all different directions. All our kids are important to us. And like, whose do I anchor to? Intercept, do that sensation focus. And then you can come to the question, how is this an opportunity for connection and growth? And when we do that, we are, what I use the positive intelligence term, sage. We are in sage, the essence of who we are, which is love and light. When we do that, we're exuding love and we can access the power. At the core of it, it's 5 different elements. It's empathy, curiosity, creativity, clarity of the big picture, what really matters. And those direct our actions. So in order to get there, doing that process of using those skills with ourselves first. Don't even think about the content of it. Remember I said it's nervous system first. Do the sensation and then come back to ourselves with empathy. And you can do this in a nanosecond. Thank you for letting me know this is something you are feeling is dangerous. It's so understandable. I'm here for you. Like, I sage me. I've got this. So it's those 4 things in the moment. Thank you. It's so understandable. I'm here for you. I've got this. That's when it's in the moment. Outside of the moment, you might be able to say to yourself for that 4th term, what do you need, sweetie? And then see what rises. Kristen Neff has wonderful work as well. That one is from Susie Lula, that self-compassion script. And it is so powerful for in the moment, if you have time, for yourself, but if not, anchor back to him or the her or them, compassion for the child, the children in the room. Oh, wow, you're all having lots of big emotions for the teachers or for our multiple kids. And this is something else I want to convey. Our emotions have a physical presence in our system that has to be digested. I sometimes use the whole emotional digestion, similar to our digestive system for food. But we need to offload, rest, digest, refuel. So each of the things we're feeling, it's so understandable that we need to offload. It's also understandable that our body needs some rest, needs to be able to digest what's going on and have time to refuel. We're already trying to do it. Knowing that our body's already trying to do it, we make that fuel high grade. So that when we're like this, in a way, we're offloading. How do we use what we already do? Like when you talked about the contact with the chair, in a way, you're offloading. In our breath, it's a rest. And feel ourselves resting into the ground. So we can press into the chair, which is the offload. We can rest into the chair for the rest. We can lean back to sort of give it time to digest. And then refuel in whatever thought or way or looking something around the room or bring in a sensation. And I know that with each question you ask, I'm going on detours, but I hope it's okay.
No, I think that this is all really, really helpful to kind of integrate that mindfulness piece into co-regulation. You know, for educators, I think there are a lot of shifts that need to happen to be able to really effectively utilize co-regulation in the classroom. I'm wondering if you recognize what some of the barriers that educators are up against when they're trying to work with students to develop regulation skills. Like, are there systemic barriers that make this more difficult, or obviously just some of the logistics that make it hard for teachers in the classroom to support emotional regulation? And if there are any ideas that you have for them?
I'm in awe of teachers. Systemically, they are not supported. The system is not set up for them to be optimal, to know how to have the time and space and make it part of the curriculum. I mean, ideally, factoring in the nervous system responses in the curriculum, how things are taught, pace at which things are taught, the rhythm with which things are taught. They're just set up. These are your goals. It's very pragmatic, like a business. This is not a business. I was in the corporate world. This is humanity. I mean, the corporate world isn't human enough. That's a whole another subject, but to the detriment of everybody, right? So treating humans as if they are machines. They're even being treated worse than machines. Machines get tune-ups all the time. We don't have that chance. So the teachers are up against the required goals, achieving it, forgetting the money, forgetting they're being asked to play so many different roles other than teacher. It's so understandable if they shut down, if they explode, if they just like say, I can't do this. I so feel for them. So, thank you for the opportunity to sort of voice. They are up against a lot, and they too have the internal radar picking up the heartbeats and energy and facial expressions and voices of every little person and big people in the room. So their nervous system is way on overload. Like, I am feeling overloaded. What I would invite teachers and parents to do is to really know your body. What's the earliest sign of it? So I've done some staffings, and one of the stories that was just so heartening is a teacher who caught herself getting activated and right then and there paused and said, hey, class, we're doing, and whatever physical sensory thing the teacher needed, and invited the whole class to do. Like, let the class know ahead of time that you as the teacher will be doing this. And I mean, I know it sounds absurd and it's not fair to put it on you, but if it's fun for you to see how you can weave it into literature and weave the whole idea of being with the nervous system, catching it, doing something that's sensory, and then switching to your sage way of approaching it. If that can be woven into every subject creatively, have fun with it. But first and foremost, help yourself know you get to take care of you, and it's the biggest gift you can give your children. In the classroom, anywhere, everybody benefits.
Well, Sheryl, this has been really just such a great conversation, and that brings me to my final question for you. If you were talking to a parent who's in the thick of it with their child and is really struggling to find a way to develop that skill of emotional regulation, what would you tell them? What is the one piece of advice that you would really just want them to hear?
Self-compassionately know it's all about nervous system. Forget the content. It's about the nervous system to be safe, social, connect, and grow.
Sheryl Stoller, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. Take good care, everyone.
Emotional regulation is a skill that can be learned. We should never assume that because of our child's neurodivergence that they can't develop these skills. Their path might be different, and the timeline for their progress might be on their own schedule. But the more we can model emotional regulation and meet them where they are, the better they'll be equipped to gradually build the independence they need. As parents, building our own emotional regulation skills is key, along with meeting kids where they are, so we can help them co-regulate on their path to learning how to self-regulate. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Sheryl Stoller works with neurodiverse families to support parents raising neurodivergent children. Details about her work are available in the show notes. Don't forget, if you're an educator, we have an event next week that you won't want to miss. It's a crash course on building a neurodiversity-affirming classroom. There's a link in the show notes where you can sign up to join us for free. Our host is Emily Kircher-Morris. Our office manager and social media director is Krista Brown. I'm the executive producer, Dave Morris. For all of us, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. This is a service of the Neurodiversity Alliance.